Working out whether your human resource strategies are actually being effective is a little bit tricky. That's why we have this whole section on effectiveness of human resource management. We're going to look at some indicators of effectiveness. The reason why it's tricky is that there's no single measurement that's going to tell you if your HR management is effective. The same way, you don't have any way of measuring whether you're a good parent or something like that. The employee-employer relationship is really complicated. So all managers can do is look at indicators of effectiveness, things that might give them clues about whether the business's human resource strategies are working. Now, the first one we're going to look at is corporate culture, and that's a little bit complicated by itself, and there's no real percentage or anything like that we can do for that. Then we're going to look at benchmarking some key variables. So we're going to look at things like changes in numbers of staff who are leaving, so changes in staff turnover. We're going to look at absenteeism, which you can also measure, accidents, which you can also measure, the level of disputation, which you can also measure, and we're going to look at worker satisfaction, which there are ways of measuring. The corporate culture is really the one that kind of sticks out as being the one that is, you really can't measure. You can try, but it's really to get a feel of it if you're able to do that. So we're going to look at corporate culture. Then we're going to look at benchmarking some of those other key variables and looking at, what's a good number, what's a good percentage for those other things to tell us that our human resource strategies are actually working. So corporate culture is about the general attitudes and the shared beliefs of the employees. Now that in itself can give an indication of whether your HR strategies are working. So what I've done is I made a table here of one list of all the different things that a business's corporate culture could involve. So what is it about their culture? And then we're going to look at what it says about the business's HR strategies. So let's say in the corporate culture, looking around at all the employees, let's say generally they're negative when it comes to teamwork. What does that say about human resource management in that business? What does it say about the human resource strategies? They mustn't be working, but which ones aren't working? It might mean that there's something wrong with the acquisition process. So maybe they're using internal promotions and everyone's fighting over those internal promotions. It's causing too much competition in a negative way. And that's why the employees are negative about teamwork, because they feel like they need to compete for a promotion. Or maybe there's something wrong with the maintenance process. So that third process out of the four processes. So maybe using individual rewards is discouraging cooperation. Maybe move to group rewards so everyone kind of, gets rewarded based on how their team does. And then that's going to encourage them, kind of in a nasty way. You're going to work as a team or you're not going to get paid as much. It's encouraging them to work towards goals as a team and do some teamwork. Let's say your corporate culture, is very negative about training. Workers don't like training. Maybe there's a problem with the development process, a training process. Maybe currently they're doing a lot of off-the-job training and going and, listening to people talk and all that, and they're seeing it as irrelevant. Maybe you should move to on-the-job training and focusing on current skills so that they're not getting really bored about the training. It might be the opposite, but, that would be generally the case. What if the corporate culture has employees leaving as soon as they're allowed in the afternoon? So let's say your culture is kind of anti-overtime. So some businesses, at the very first minute that they can leave, everyone just goes. And you'd have to pay them to stay back. You'd have to pay them overtime. So how do you get people to really want to do overtime? Maybe there's a problem with the maintenance process. The remuneration system that you're using, maybe you're using monetary awards that aren't enough. Maybe, the monetary rewards are ineffective. Maybe you need to do some more non-monetary rewards. Maybe if workers got a little more praise from their managers and a little more, or maybe it's, it could be a childcare issue for some of them. Maybe if you look towards, having a non-monetary reward of free childcare or something like that, you might be able to keep the workers there longer. It might also have to do with, having the skills that they're using, the task design. It could be really anything. And if your culture is kind of focused on doing whatever they want rather than meeting the requirements of managers, if the employees aren't scared of the managers, aren't worried about what they think, then maybe you've got another problem with the maintenance process. Maybe your working conditions might be a little too relaxed and you need to move towards a bit more pressure to perform. You might have more discipline, stuff like that, because your employees might be either not at all motivated, so they're not really worried about it, or maybe they're not worried about what the managers think. They feel that sort of disconnection. So the maintenance process is generally going to be the issue when the corporate culture is struggling to be positive. Now, how do you measure this? Corporate culture is the most difficult to measure. That's why we've got it first. The other ones you can kind of benchmark and have things like that. You can set percentages and numbers, but the corporate culture is going to be the most difficult to actually measure. Managers can have opinions about these issues. They might give feedback to HR like, well, my team really is very negative about training or whatever. They can give that feedback to human resources. Another way is to use like staff surveys. You can ask them whether they feel that the agreed values of the company, so if the company is focused on teamwork, you can see whether they're actually being put into practice. You can ask them. You can't really prove it, and they can't prove it, and hopefully it's going to be anonymous anyway. So they might be honest, or they might not be honest, or it doesn't really matter. They might not even fill it in. So you're not really able to get a proper figure. Things like staff accidents, unless the staff are having a whole bunch of accidents they're not telling anyone about, that's something that you can kind of keep a measure of, and you can work out whether it's actually working. But corporate culture, I would just, make a paragraph out of that table that was just there.